The night Reeve showed up at her door without calling ahead was the same night Sasha had decided she was done. Not done with the job, done with pretending the job wasn't slowly taking pieces of her she'd never get back. She'd been sitting on the floor of her bathroom, not dramatically, not because something terrible had happened, just because the tile was cold, and cold was the only thing that still felt real. Her back against the tub, her laptop balanced on her knees, a spreadsheet open that she'd been staring at for 40 minutes without actually seeing it. The numbers made sense. They always made sense to her. It was everything else that didn't. She heard the knock and didn't move. The second knock was harder. The third wasn't a knock at all. It was the sound of her door opening. She'd left it unlocked again, a habit she'd picked up somewhere between trusting no one and simply not caring anymore. And then footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, the kind of footsteps that had never been in a hurry because they'd never needed to be. Sasha, his voice, Reeve's voice, in her apartment. She closed her laptop. She didn't stand up. "In here," she said, because hiding seemed like more effort than she had left. He appeared in the doorway a moment later, all 6 feet of him, coat still on, the dark wool one he wore like it was part of his actual body. He looked at her on the floor. She looked up at him from the floor. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. "The door was unlocked," he said finally. "I know. That's a problem. I know that too." He looked around the bathroom, the water glass she'd left on the edge of the sink, the single overhead light that flickered sometimes when the heat came on, the spreadsheet printouts she'd taped to the wall 3 weeks ago because she ran out of space on her desk. His expression didn't change. It never really did. But something shifted in his jaw, something small that she'd learned in 18 months of working for him to notice. "Why are you on the floor?" he said. Not a question exactly. "The chair in my office broke." "You don't have an office?" "The chair at my desk broke. I'm using the floor." He looked at the laptop, then at her. "You've been in here since when?" She didn't answer. "Sasha, since maybe 4. It was past 11. He didn't say anything to that. He stepped over her legs, not around over, like he was crossing a threshold he'd already decided to cross, and sat down on the edge of the tub. Not on the floor. He wasn't the kind of man who sat on floors. But he folded himself down enough that they were almost at eye level, which was the closest thing to an accommodation she'd ever gotten from him. She waited for him to say why he was there. He pulled out his phone, looked at something, put it away. "The Brennan file," he said. "The one you flagged last Thursday. Kowalski told me you were wrong. Kowalski is wrong. I know. That's why I'm here." She looked at him. "I need you to walk me through it," he said. "Tonight." She thought about telling him she was tired. She thought about telling him that she'd been sitting on the bathroom floor for 7 hours, because the thought of going back to her desk made her chest feel like concrete. That she hadn't eaten since the granola bar she'd found in her coat pocket at 2 in the afternoon. That this job, his job, the numbers she ran for him, the quiet work of making sure money moved cleanly through systems that were never supposed to be clean, was excellent work if you were the kind of person who didn't mind what it cost you. She was not sure, anymore, whether she was that kind of person. "Okay," she said. She got up off the floor. She didn't do it gracefully. Her left leg had gone half numb from the cold tile, and she had to catch herself on the edge of the sink, and she saw him move, just slightly, one hand coming up like he might do something useful, before she got her footing. "I'm fine," she said. He lowered his hand. She ran water over her face at the sink, looked at herself in the mirror for 1 second, looked away. She led him out to her desk, which was really her kitchen table, because her apartment was 460 square feet, and the idea of a separate office was a joke she'd made to herself when she signed the lease, and opened the laptop and pulled up the file. She walked him through it. She was good at this. That was the thing about Sasha. She was very, genuinely good at the one thing she'd always been able to do, which was see patterns in numbers that other people missed. She'd grown up doing it at her mother's kitchen table in Sudbury, balancing her mother's books when she was 13 because her mother couldn't and someone had to. She'd done it through 2 years of college before she ran out of money. She'd done it in 3 different accounting jobs before the third one introduced her to a man who introduced her to Reeve's people. She'd been doing it for Reeve for 18 months. She showed him exactly where Kowalski had misread the ledger. She showed him the discrepancy, small, intentional looking, the kind of thing you'd bury on page 11, because you were hoping no one counted that carefully. She showed him what it connected to. Reeve listened without interrupting. That was one of the things about him. He listened like it was a professional skill, like he'd trained himself to do it, which she suspected he had. His eyes moved over the screen as she talked. His hand stayed still on the table. When she finished, he sat back. "How long did it take you to find it?" he said. 20 minutes, and Kowalski had the file for how long. He nodded once. That small jaw thing again. "He's been with us 9 years, Reeve said. Not like he was defending Kowalski. Like he was placing him in a ledger. "I know. You're 28. 29. She'd had a birthday 2 weeks ago. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. He looked at her. 29, he said, adjusting without apology. "And you found in 20 minutes what he missed in 6 days, or what he chose not to find," she said. The room went quiet. She knew she probably shouldn't have said that. She said it anyway, because it was true, and she was too tired tonight to perform the careful version of herself. Reeve looked at her for a long moment. "Say that again." "I think Kowalski knows exactly what's in that file," she said. "I think he's protecting someone. I don't know who yet. But if you let me run the full accounts going back 8 months, I'll tell you within a week." He didn't answer right away. He picked up his coffee. He'd brought one, she noticed now, set it on the corner of her table without asking, and drank from it. "You've been sitting on this," he said. "I flagged it Thursday. You flagged an anomaly. You didn't tell me what you thought it meant." She didn't say anything. "Why?" She looked at the screen. "Because I wasn't sure you'd want to know." The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet. "Sasha." His voice was even. It was always even. "My entire operation runs on accurate information. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes." "Then explain to me why you would sit on something like this." She turned to face him. She was aware, in some background part of her brain, that she was having this conversation at 11:15 at night, in an apartment where the overhead light in the kitchen had a dead bulb she hadn't replaced yet, wearing the same clothes she'd worn to his office 3 days ago, because she'd worked late and slept on her couch and just kept going. She was aware that she probably looked exactly as worn down as she felt. "Because Kowalski has been with you 9 years, she said, "and I've been with you 18 months. And when someone like me tells someone like you that someone like him is possibly skimming or covering for someone who is, the math on who gets believed isn't usually complicated." He said nothing. "I flagged the anomaly," she said. "I documented everything. I left it in your hands. That's what I thought was smart." "And what do you think now?" She looked at him. "I think you're here at 11 at night because you already looked at the file yourself, and you came to the same conclusion I did, and you want to know if I'll say it out loud." Something moved through his expression, not quite surprise. Something closer to recalibration. "You're not wrong," he said. She turned back to the screen. Her hands were steadier than she expected. "Give me the access," she said. "The full account's 8 months back. I'll have something for you by Friday." He was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll have it sent over tonight." She nodded. He didn't leave. She became aware of this after a few seconds, that he was still sitting at her table, still holding his coffee, still looking at her kitchen, and the dead bulb and the stack of mail she hadn't opened, and the single mug in the drying rack that indicated, clearly, that she cooked for one and probably didn't bother with that either. "When did you last eat?" he said. She blinked. "Today. What? I had something this afternoon." "What?" She thought about it. "I don't remember exactly." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. She watched, confused, as he went to her fridge and opened it. She watched him look at what was in it, which was not very much, and then close it. He opened the cabinet above the stove. He opened the one beside it. "There's pasta," she said, because it seemed like she should contribute something to this exercise. "I can see that. He was reading the labels on things." She couldn't tell what he was looking for. She had the strange sensation of watching someone do something completely outside the parameters of what she thought they were. "You don't have to." "Sit down," he said. She sat down. He made pasta. She watched him do it, which was one of the stranger experiences of her life. Reeve, in her tiny kitchen, in his coat which he still hadn't taken off, filling her only good pot with water and finding the salt like it was something he did regularly and not a surreal departure from every interaction they'd had for 18 months. He didn't make conversation while he did it. She didn't try to make any either. The water boiled. He cooked the pasta. He found the olive oil and the pepper, and not much else, and made something out of it that smelled better than it had any right to. He set a bowl in front of her. She ate it. She was hungrier than she'd realized, which was a thing that kept happening to her lately, losing track of her own body's signals, the hunger and the tiredness and the way her hands shook sometimes if she went too long without either food or sleep. She ate the whole bowl. She didn't look up much. When she finished, he took the bowl to the sink and rinsed it. Then he turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at her. "How long has it been like this?" he said. She knew what he meant. She wasn't going to pretend she didn't. "Few months," she said. "Since the Harlow job." She hadn't told him the Harlow job had done something to her. She'd just handed in the work, clean and correct, and gone home and not slept properly since. "It's fine. It's not fine. You're sitting on your bathroom floor at 11 at night. I was working." "You were disappearing," he said. "There's a difference." She looked at her hands on the table. She didn't know what to do with the fact that he'd noticed. She didn't know what to do with any of this, with him in her kitchen, with the bowl she'd eaten, with the way he was looking at her like she was something in a ledger that wasn't adding up, and it was bothering him. "I don't need," she started. "I'm not offering you anything," he said. "I'm telling you what I observed. I need you functional. The Kowalski situation is going to get complicated, and I need someone who can see what other people miss. That person cannot be running on nothing." She looked at him. "So this is about the work." He held her gaze. "Go to sleep, Sasha." He picked up his coat, realized he'd taken it off at some point, set it over the back of the other kitchen chair, and she'd missed exactly when, and he put it on. He walked to her front door. "Lock this," he said, hand on the knob. "I will." He paused. Not long, just a breath's worth of pause in which she felt something she couldn't name. Something about the way he was standing, the angle of his shoulders. The fact that he'd come here tonight and made her eat and said the word disappearing, like it meant something to him beyond the purely logistical. Then he left. She locked the door. She stood there for a minute, hand still on the deadbolt, and thought about what had just happened. Reeve showing up, Reeve in her kitchen, Reeve saying she was disappearing. She went and got into bed, an actual bed, not the couch, for the first time in probably 2 weeks. She lay there and looked at the ceiling. She thought about the Brennan file. She thought about Kowalski and whoever he was covering for. She thought about the access Reeve had promised and what she'd find in it, and what it would cost her and him and the person on the other end of whatever thread she was about to pull. She thought, briefly and against her will, about the bowl of pasta. She fell asleep before she could finish the thought. The access came through at 6:30 in the morning, with a message from a number she recognized as one of his people. Full accounts. 8 months. Reeve says call if you need more. She sat up in bed and opened her laptop. She spent 3 days in the numbers. She found what she was looking for on day 2, buried the way these things always were, in small round figures that looked like rounding errors until you lined them up and realized they were too round, too consistent, too perfectly spaced to be anything but intentional. Someone had been moving money sideways for 7 months. Not a lot. Enough. She cross-referenced. She traced. She built the chain link by link until she had the whole thing laid out in a document that was 11 pages long and footnoted and could not be argued with. She sent it to Reeve at 4 in the morning on the 3rd day. At 4:14, she got a response. 2 words. Confirmed Thursday. Thursday meant a meeting. A real one, in his building, with him and whoever else he needed present for this. She'd never been to one of those meetings. She'd handed work in and gotten responses, but she'd never been in the room where the responses became decisions. She pressed her back against her headboard and looked at the message on her screen. She thought about the word confirmed and what it meant that he'd already known enough to confirm it. She thought about Kowalski, who had 9 years and apparently not enough sense to cover his tracks against someone who'd grown up balancing books on a kitchen table in Sudbury. She thought about the word Thursday and what it meant that he'd said it like it was assumed she'd be there. She set her phone down. She looked at the ceiling again. She thought, this is not the job I thought I took. Then she thought, but I'm still here. She wasn't sure yet what to do with that. She got up. She filled the pot with water. She waited for it to boil. Outside her window, Toronto was starting its slow, grey November morning. The lake somewhere behind the buildings. The cold coming in under the gap in her window frame she'd been meaning to fix. The sound of the streetcar 2 blocks over grinding through its turn. She made coffee. She stood at the counter and drank it. She thought about Thursday. She thought about the way he'd said disappearing, like the word cost him something to say. She thought about the 11 pages she'd sent him at 4 in the morning and the 2 words that came back 14 minutes later, and what it meant that a man who ran every calculation like a ledger had shown up at her door with a reason that was real, but not quite the whole reason. The water boiled. She made her coffee. She sat down at her table. She opened a new spreadsheet and started working.